Go concurrency is one of the most powerful parts of the language, but it is also where many beginners get stuck. In this video, we'll build 15 real examples using goroutines, channels, wait groups, mutexes, and context. No long theory, just practical patterns you can use in real Go projects. We start with the basic building blocks of Go concurrency, running work in a goroutine and waiting for several goroutines to finish cleanly. Sometimes you want a small side task to run while the main flow keeps moving, like sending a notification or writing a log. Here we write a notify function, start it with go, and then let main continue doing its own work. Now we run the program and watch the two flows print in the same terminal output. Let's break down why this works. The call with go does not block main, so notify starts separately while main keeps going. The sleep calls only make the timing easy to see in a tiny demo. They are not real synchronization. Now we show the practical rule to remember. Sleep is fine for this first tiny demonstration, but real applications should use proper coordination. When correctness matters, reach for channels, context cancellation, or sync wait group instead of guessing with time delays. In real programs, we often start several independent jobs and need to exit only after all of them finish. Here we create a wait group, add 3 jobs before launching them, and each worker calls done with defer. Now we run it and look for the final line after every worker is finished. Let's break down the coordination. Add increases the number of tasks main is waiting for, done decreases it, and wait blocks until the counter becomes 0. The workers may start in any order, but the final message waits for all of them. Now we show the best habit for using wait groups safely. Call add before starting the goroutines, because the main goroutine should know how much work exists before workers can finish. This avoids timing bugs where wait observes the wrong counter state. Next, we move from simply running goroutines to communicating between them. Channels let goroutines pass values and completion signals without sharing writable memory. When background work produces a value, we need a safe way to get that value back. Here the goroutine calculates a number and sends it into an unbuffered channel. Now we run it and see that main prints the result only after the send happens. Let's break down the flow. This is an unbuffered channel, so the send and receive meet each other directly. Main pauses at the receive line until the goroutine sends the computed value. Now we show the better mental model for channels instead of multiple goroutines writing the same variable. Let one goroutine own the result and send it to whoever needs it. That keeps the data flow explicit and easier to reason about. Streams need an end signal, otherwise the receiver may wait forever. Here the producer sends 3 IDs, closes the channel, and main consumes the stream with for range. Now we run it and watch the loop exit cleanly after the last value. Let's break down the important detail. Closing the channel does not erase values that were already sent. The range loop receives all available values and then stops when it sees that the channel is closed. Now we show the channel closing rule that prevents panics. The sender owns the decision to close because the sender knows when production is finished. A receiver should read until the channel closes, but it should not close a channel it does not own. A buffered channel is useful when short bursts are normal, like logs, metrics, or small job queues. Here we create a channel with capacity 3, send 3 values first, and only then start receiving. Now we run it and confirm that all 3 sends complete before processing begins. Let's break down the behavior. Because the capacity is 3, the channel can hold 3 strings while no receiver is active yet. When we receive later, the values come back in the same order they were sent. Now we show the practical rule for buffering. A buffer is not a magic fix for slow consumers. It is a small intentional amount of back pressure. Pick a capacity based on expected bursts and still make sure the consumer can keep up over time. In this section, we move from single goroutines to controlled worker patterns. These are the patterns you reach for when many small jobs need to run concurrently without overwhelming your machine or an external service. When you have many jobs, starting one goroutine per job can get messy fast. Here we create a fixed worker pool. 3 workers all read from the same jobs channel, process 10 jobs, and then shut down cleanly. The channel gives every worker the next available job, and the wait group lets main wait for them. Now we run it and check that the work is spread across multiple workers. Let's break down why this works. Closing the jobs channel tells every worker that no more jobs are coming. The range loop exits naturally, each worker calls done, and main prints the final line only after all workers have stopped. Now we show the best way to think about this pattern. Pick a worker count based on real limits. CPU cores, database connections, API rate limits, or disk throughput. A worker pool gives you concurrency, but it also gives you control. A worker pool usually needs to return something, not just print logs. In this example, workers receive jobs, calculate a result, and send a small struct back through a results channel. Main reads exactly one result for each job it sent. Now we run it and notice that completed results do not have to arrive in input order. Let's break down the result order. The input jobs are sent as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But workers finish based on timing and scheduling. That means the results channel gives you completion order, not original input order. Now we show the best practice for worker results. Treat result order as non-deterministic unless your code explicitly preserves order. Include a job ID, index, or key in the results so the caller can sort or place it correctly. Now we add cancellation. In real systems, goroutines should stop when the caller is done, when a request times out, or when the result is no longer needed. Long-running work should have a way to stop. Here, main creates a cancelable context, starts a worker loop, lets it process a few ticks, and then calls cancel. The worker listens to CTX dini and inside select, so shutdown is part of the normal control flow. Now we run it and watch the worker exit on purpose instead of leaking in the background. Let's break down why the worker stops cleanly. Calling cancel closes the context's done channel. The select sees that signal, prints the cancellation message, returns, and closes the done channel, so main knows shutdown is complete. Now we show the best practice for cancelable functions. Pass context as the first parameter when a function may block, do I/O, or run for an unknown amount of time. That makes cancellation visible in the function signature and easy to pass through call chains. Sometimes cancellation should happen automatically after a deadline. In this example, slow work takes 200 milliseconds, but the context times out after 100 milliseconds. The result channel is buffered, so the worker can finish without blocking if main has already moved on. Now we run it and see main stop waiting instead of hanging forever. Let's break down the timing. The worker needs 200 milliseconds before it sends a result. The context deadline arrives after 100 milliseconds, so CTS.in becomes ready first, and the timeout branch runs. Now we show the best practice for timeout contexts. Always call cancel even when you expect the timeout to fire. It releases timer resources earlier and keeps the function's cleanup rules simple. This section focuses on select as a coordination tool. We use it to wait on multiple possible results and continue as soon as one useful answer is ready. When two sources can answer the same question, you may want the fastest valid response. Here we start two simulated fetchers. Give each one a different delay, and use select to take the first answer. Both fetchers also receive the same context, so the loser can be canceled. Now we run it and see the faster source win. Let's break down the race. The primary source waits 150 milliseconds, while the replica waits only 60. The replica channel receives first, so select runs that branch and ignores the slower result. Now we show the best practice for racing work. Do not just take the first answer and forget the rest. Pair the race with context cancellation so slower goroutines stop doing work that no one will use. Now we move into resource control. These patterns help you run concurrent work without letting it grow without limits. When you call an external API for many users, launching everything at once can hit rate limits or overload your own process. Here we use a buffered channel as a semaphore with capacity 3, and every goroutine must acquire a slot before doing work. Now we run it and check that the running count never goes above 3. Let's break down why this works. The channel buffer is the limit. Once it contains 3 values, the next send blocks. That means the goroutine exists, but it cannot enter the protected work until another request releases its slot. Now we show the practical rule for this pattern. Use a semaphore when the tasks are independent, but the resource they use is limited, like an API, a database, or CPU-heavy work. Keep the acquire and release close together so the limit is easy to reason about. Next is shared state. Go makes concurrency simple to start, but shared memory still needs clear protection. Shared counters and in-memory maps show up all the time in request handlers and metrics code. In this example, many goroutines increment the same counter, so we put only the increment inside lock and unlock. Now we run it and verify that the final count is exactly 100,000. Let's break down the result. Incrementing an integer is not one tiny indivisible action. It reads the value, changes it, and writes it back. The mutex makes that whole sequence exclusive. so another goroutine cannot overwrite a value in the middle. Now we show the best way to use this safely in real code. Keep the locked section as small as possible because everything inside it runs one goroutine at a time. If the function has multiple returns, defer, unlock right after lock, so the mutex is always released. For request counts and event totals, we often just need one number that many goroutines can update. This example uses atomic int 64, so each worker can add to the metric without creating a mutex around the loop. Now we run it and check that the final metric is stable. Let's break down why this is a good fit. Each add operation is safe even when multiple goroutines call it at the same time. Then load gives us a safe final read after all workers finish. Now we show the important boundary for atomics. Use them for simple independent counters, not for complex state. If 2 or 3 fields must change together, a mutex or a channel-based owner is usually clearer and safer. Now we connect goroutines into pipelines. This is useful when data moves through clear stages. Pipelines help when data moves through separate steps like parse, enrich, and write. Here the generator sends numbers, the transform stage squares them, and the final stage prints the even results. Now we run it and make sure the pipeline finishes instead of hanging. Let's break down the shutdown. The generator closes its output, then Square sees that input is done and closes its own output. The printer ranges until that final channel closes, so the program has a clean end. Now we show the production rule for pipelines. Each stage should close only its own output channel, because it knows when no more values will be sent. In longer pipelines also add cancellation, so slow or failing consumers do not leave upstream goroutines blocked. Finally, let's look at a production pattern for request-scoped concurrent work, where errors and cancellation matter. In production, concurrent service calls need more than a wait group, because errors should usually stop related work. This example starts 3 tasks with error group, makes billing fail, and has recommendations listen for context cancellation. Now we run it and watch the final error come from the failing task. Let's break down what happened. Billing returns an error first, and error group cancels the shared context. Recommendations is waiting on that context, so it exits early instead of doing unnecessary work. Now we show the best practice for this pattern. Use error group for request-scoped concurrent work where tasks belong to one operation and one failure should cancel the rest. Make every slow task context-aware. Otherwise, cancellation is requested, but the task may keep running anyway. Now you've seen the Go concurrency patterns that appear again and again in real code and interviews. If this helped, like the video, subscribe to Dev Level Up, and write in the comments which Go topic or example set you want next.